So today we're going to learn how to stop getting founder zoned and how to turn networking events into investor checks. So who this webinar is for: founders who are trying to fundraise, who have tapped their personal network and any warm intros that they have, and they're fed up with going to networking events and leaving without a check. I know that when I was a founder, this was me. I didn't know where to find investors. And so I burnt myself out trying to go to, every event, talking to everyone. So over the next 45 minutes, we are going to go through how to know which events to go to, how to walk into any conversation with a stranger, how to get people to actually want to help you. So either to invest or make intros or make other connections for you, and how to build goodwill with people over time without any additional effort. And how we can combine all this to get you actual checks for your company. So my promise to you is I will give you a step-by-step foolproof strategy to network like a boss, stop wasting time talking to useless people, and generate a clear ROI from events you attend. This is what I use. This is the system I use to raise money, and the system I teach other founders. So question to you guys: does this sound like you? I go to a lot of events. A lot of them are a waste of time. They are draining. I face constant rejection. I can't identify who's an investor. I don't know how to follow up. I'm new to a city, or I'm traveling, or I don't have any friends here. Thumbs up, or show of hands if this applies to you. Okay, we got a couple yeses here. So to summarize it, you put in a lot of work and it's just not yielding anything. And the real problem here is that it's not that you're a bad founder. It's not that you don't know how to fundraise, or you don't know how to network or make relationships. The problem is you don't have a networking system. And so you don't have a repeatable process to follow. And you don't have reasonable expectations. So you go to an event thinking, okay, if someone doesn't write me a check on the spot, this event was a waste of my time. And so you show up and hope that somehow you're going to get this check by through your presence coming to this event, and you can't measure progress because you don't have a system to actually with set KPIs that you're measuring. So the problem is you don't have a system. Once you have a system, you can make the most of every event. You don't have to think about what to do anymore at events. You have clear steps that you follow. You'll remove your pre-event anxiety. It's the unknown that gives you anxiety. You can build a network of advocates, and these are people that are going to help you in your fundraise and across your entire founder journey. So who am I? I'm Salim Ahmed. I've worked 13 years with startups, and I've personally raised more than $1 million using this system. These are the only two pieces of information you need to know about me for this for the scope of this presentation. So I use this system to raise, and I teach other founders how to raise using this system. So let's look at the worst case scenario, because my system works for the worst case scenario. If it works for the worst case scenario, it'll work for your situation. I guarantee your situation is not as bad as this. Worst case scenario is that you're a founder, you just moved to a new city, you're going to your very first event, you don't know anyone there, and you don't have anything to offer anyone there. My system works in this scenario. So if it'll work in this scenario, it'll work in yours. So my system is 5 rules. We're going to talk about the 5 rules. 5 rules to my networking system. And these are the lowest effort, highest return principles that I have been able to discover during my networking experience. And we're going to go through all of these on this call. We're going to jump in right now. Any questions before we jump in? You can throw it in the chat or unmute.
Are we focusing on in-person events, or would this work for online networking events as well?
This is for in-person. I don't, when you say online networking, you mean like a Zoom call where you meet people?
Yeah, like I mean, I get invites to a lot of these online networking events, and I just don't know like what to do with them or like what the actual purpose is. It's almost like a speed dating investor thingy. And so I was just curious. I mean, I love in-person networking, but I was just wondering if the system would work for like an online networking event as well, where you meet other founders and other investors online as
I
part of
think,
a Zoom meeting.
yeah, I think a lot of the principles would work. And I think in a curated situation like that, it's actually easier because you're both meeting for the purpose of networking. Whereas at events, you get a whole bunch of randos and there isn't an expectation that you're going to talk to people for the purpose of networking. So I would absolutely say the principles will apply to those online events.
Okay.
It might actually be easier in those types of settings.
Okay, helpful. Thank you.
Okay, 5 rules. Let's start. They're not hard. It's pretty simple. Rule number 1, showing up. It sounds easy, and it is easy because showing up to an event is 99% of the battle. Most of the time, most of the energy founders use is pre-event deciding whether they should go or not. So I'm going to make the decision for you and tell you to go to all events at first. And the purpose of going to events, and now you might say, you know, some events are good, some events are bad. Trust me, I know most events are not great from a networking perspective. But your goal initially is not to get a check. Your goal is to practice the system. So to practice the system, you go to any event. The worse the event, the better, because the better it is to practice and the more like harder situations you find yourself in. Go to every event. That's rule number 1, show up. Rule number 2, always have a wingman. Does anyone here not know what a wingman is? Basically, a wingman is a person that you both go to the event with the same understanding, that you're both there to network. And so a good wingman is worth their weight in gold because you guys are able to share information about which events are good, which events are not good. You can they'll make intros for you. They'll help you understand who's there. They'll warn you about energy vampires, people to avoid. And so you can divide and conquer. And a wingman can be anyone. They don't need to be another founder. They don't need to be someone fundraising. It's actually better if they're not fundraising in the same space as you, because then you guys can split up basically who you speak with. Any wingman is better than no wingman. Unless, there's very few situations where I would suggest you don't take a wingman. It's almost always better to go to the event with someone. Now, if you don't have one, you can find one at the event using the exact same principles that we're going to go through in terms of how to turn someone into an advocate for you. So this is rule number 2, always have a wingman. Rule number 3, your goal at a networking event is to blank. You're not there to pitch everyone. We're gonna go through what your goal isn't. So your goal is not to pitch everyone. Your goal is not there to go there to socialize. You're not there to get a check. You're not even there to build relationships. This is not the goal of a networking event. Networking events, and this is why most founders burn out and they get really frustrated, because they go in with like these as their goals. This is not the goal of a networking event. Your goal is to add value to others. And if you're able to add value, it builds goodwill with other people. And the more goodwill you have, the more reciprocity you'll receive. And this is how you generate the highest ROI in the long run. So your job is to just plant seeds. You're not building relationships. You're not getting a check. You're not pitching people. You're just planting seeds with those individuals. And those over time will grow into something valuable. When I raised, I went to one event that I raised 240K off of. I did not leave that event with a check. I left that event with nothing. All I did was plant the right seeds. And over the next year, those seeds grew into 240,000 in funding for my company. And this is something you can add value at any event with anyone. There's no prerequisite to being able to add value to someone. So quick aside, what is value? Value is subjective. What you value may not be what someone else values. And so the way you determine what someone you met values is you ask them, you ask your audience, you ask them what would they value, what would be useful to them. So what are some examples of this? You have to get creative. It's not just like people value, what do most people value? Like money. Like most people are there for business development purposes to make more money. But there's so many different means to that. So what are some examples? An intro to someone you know, to an intro to someone you just met, an intro to someone you follow or someone you have within your network. That could be potentially valuable to someone. An event, information on another event you're going to. Maybe you meet someone and they're like, oh, I really like this event. Do you know anything else? Oh yeah, I just found this other event, or someone else just told me about this event. That's useful. That is valuable to someone. And don't assume that just because you are not that well networked, or you're you don't have that much information about the city or the networking scene, that you don't have much to offer. I've been to so many events where someone tells me about another event that they're hosting, and it has nothing to do with me, like literally nothing. It's like AI, crypto, or blockchain or something. And I meet someone else at that event, like the next person I meet, and they're in that space. And I'm like, oh, I just heard about this event. That's useful to them. I'm actually offering value to them, and it costed me absolutely nothing. So that is something valuable. Events that you can share, advice, feedback. If it's something that you're qualified to give feedback on, you can give that in a very short period of time. Joining their mailing list, if you're potentially an audience for whatever they do, whatever they write about, that's valuable to them. Everybody's looking at increasing their exposure. So if it's of interest to you, that is of value to someone. Adding them to your mailing list. If you have a mailing list, if they are a potential audience, and the information you share is relevant to them, that's value. Be each other's wingman. So say you're both like noobs and you both don't know anyone or anything there. At the very least, you can be each other's wingman for the duration of that event, and etc. There's plenty of ways that you can add value. It starts with understanding your audience and what they need. So that was rule number 3. Your goal at the event is to add value. Rule number 4, be intentional about every interaction. So we're going to get into the meat of this right now. So how are you, what does this mean? Being intentional means that everyone you talk to and every conversation that you have is planned, and it's you have an intention behind it. You're not just talking randomly to people for the sake of it. This is how you expend energy and don't get anything in return. You can talk to random people, but you need a plan. It needs to be contextualized within your overall networking strategy. So how can you be intentional about every interaction? These are the steps you follow for interactions. This is basically when you're talking to people at events. Profile your target. Before you talk to anyone, you have to take 10 seconds to look at them and profile them. And what you're doing is you're building a hypothesis. This is before you speak to them, before you speak to anyone at an event. You're building a hypothesis about who that person is, what they do, what you think would be of interest to them. Now, I have a question for you guys. What attributes are you looking at in those 10 seconds? If you just came across someone at an event, you're going to talk to them. What data can you collect in 10 seconds?
The way they're dressed.
The way they're dressed. Okay. What else?
Who they're speaking with.
Okay.
If you can recognize them.
Okay. And I would actually go further on the way they're dressed in terms of how they look. I would even go further than that and say, look at their age, gender, appearance, all of these things. That's all you can pull, that and who they're talking to. There's not much else you can learn from someone in 10 seconds if they're new, if they're new and you've never seen them before. So do you guys think this criteria is superficial? Yes or no?
Or
Maybe
yes,
slightly.
definitely.
Yeah, because it's giving you a preconceived notion.
Definitely.
So it is superficial. It is 100% superficial because you don't know who that person is. But the point is that you don't have any other information to go off of. You have to build a hypothesis, and you're gonna go test that hypothesis. It only remains stereotyping and superficial if you keep that image of them after you've after you've spoken with them and you've seen contradictory information. You have to be able to update that hypothesis. But if you go in without a hypothesis, you're going to be wrong 100% of the time. At least with a hypothesis, at least with superficial criteria, you can be right maybe 50, 60, 70% of the time, depending on how good you're at. So you need to profile them so that you can go in with the right with the right hypothesis that you're going to test out. Okay, you have your profile. So there's a guy, he's a tech bro, and I have assumed that he's here to fundraise for his AI startup. This is what I've assumed just based on looking at him and the type of people he's talking to. Next step, enter the conversation. Who here faces feels that there is a stigma with interrupting people or walking up to strangers? Does anyone have that fear? No, Mike doesn't.
I do.
Amr doesn't. Misha does. Okay. So what do you do at networking events, Misha?
So usually when I go to these networking events, I think LinkedIn has been really helpful because when people advertise they're going for these events, I follow those people and then I make a warm introduction over LinkedIn. And then I try and spot them at these events. And then I go there and make my introduction. I'm like, hey, we're connected on LinkedIn. I reached out to you a few weeks back. Love to just sit down and just understand more of what it is that you do. That's how I usually do it. It's been a hit or a miss.
So that is a very good way. That's the cheat code way of doing it. Let's assume that you don't have that luxury, and you definitely should do that. You definitely should do a hybrid approach. But let's say you went to an event and you don't know anyone there. How do you break into a conversation with strangers?
Usually if it's someone who's like spoken, like I've done this once, she was speaking at an event. I've never met her before. I don't know her, but I just happened to see her speak at this event. And so after she got off stage, I just immediately went up to her and said, I just loved what you shared. And then I introduced myself, but I was anxious as hell when I did that because I didn't know what the response would be.
What was the response?
She just said, yeah, sure. And she kind of just like brushed me off because, she had like another event to get to at that same, like she had another speech to do. But then I went back and I connected with her on LinkedIn after that. And then I joined like the WhatsApp group that she was part of. So she occasionally acknowledges me, but it's someone that I look up to.
Gotcha. So you had an extended time period to profile your target because she was giving a talk.
I met her for the first time at that talk. I didn't know she existed before I saw her at that.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. So you talked to a stranger and you didn't die. Is this correct?
I didn't die, but I think to your point, it's entering conversations where people already have that rapport and, they are connected. They each know what they're bringing into the conversation. And so I find it very hard to be the third person entering that conversation.
So it is hard. And most people feel uncomfortable. I still to this day feel uncomfortable. But I will give you guys the easiest way to break into a conversation, how to get social buy-in. This is basically when you're interrupting someone, you feel like they're doing you a favor. So there's an easy way to get the social buy-in for you entering that conversation. Harvard did a study, and basically the researcher went around and cut in front of the line on people waiting to use the copy machine. And so she would say, excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the Xerox machine? So when she used this line, the compliance rate was 60%. So 60% of people allowed her to cut in front of her. Now, when she changed the line, and so that's okay. I mean, that's not great. That still means 40% of people took offense or said no. When she changed the line to give a reason, excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the Xerox machine because I'm in a rush? Now, all of a sudden, this jumps up to 94% compliance. So she gave a valid reason for why she has to cut the line. 94%. It makes sense. So here's where it gets interesting. When she gave this reason, I have 5 pages. Can I use the Xerox machine because I have to make some copies? It has absolutely, this reason is nonsensical. It has absolutely nothing to do with why she needs to cut in front of the line. What do you guys think the compliance rate was?
0.
Probably went above, it probably went above the 94%.
Above, with a worse excuse?
Yeah.
They felt bad for her. They thought she wasn't quite all there.
She gave some sort of an excuse, and people tend not to think.
They tend not to think 100%. They tend not to think. And so the compliance rate was actually 93%. It was almost the exact same as the valid argument. An invalid argument and a valid argument both get social buy-in. And so the key thing between these 2 scenarios and this one is the word because. If you use the word because, you will get social buy-in. It doesn't matter what the reason is. Literally not. So if you're going to interrupt someone, just use the word because, and you will get there. In more cases than not, you'll get their social buy-in. So I saw you. I wanted to talk to you because I saw you from across the room, because I liked your hair, because your earrings are nice. You just use the word because, put anything after the word because, and it will work. I've tried this out myself. It literally works. Okay. So Misha, now you know how to not feel bad about.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep saying
people.
because to everyone I
Just use the
meet.
word because. There you go. All right. So you've successfully entered the conversation using the word because. What's next? What's next is you want to disarm them with an opener. How do you disarm the person? Most founders do this wrong. Most founders jump into their pitch. They're like, I do this and I do that. And they start talking about their technology. The way to disarm someone is by not talking. So your conversation open, like when you entered the conversation, is the trigger for them to talk about that topic. So you say, I saw your talk, whatever it is, whatever piece of information you have about the because, you don't say anything else after that, and you let the person fill the void. Every human, most humans, will fill an empty space. They will talk. Have you guys seen Inception? You know how they create like the dream world, and they fill it. They put like safes and like locked doors and stuff, and then the person's subconscious fills that space. That's like how humans are at networking events. If you just create the context, which is I'm another person standing in front of you, they will fill it with empty space. So the trigger is how you enter the conversation, then you don't say anything. This is how you disarm someone. You let them continue with that conversation until that thread comes to an end.
That's also something we do in interviews. Sorry to interrupt, Salim, but in HR, when we interview and we want the candidate to like really open up, they always encourage the person who's asking the questions to like leave space for the candidate. So that's a great point.
There you go. I do this all the time, in person, on one-on-ones, on Zoom calls, on webinars like this. Sometimes I just like stop talking and let other people fill the space if they want to. Get comfortable with silence, because this is how you get other people. You're here to actually listen and learn about the other person. During this process, you're validating and updating your hypothesis. Okay, so you've let them talk. You finished up that initial thread. You let them you let them lead the subject. Only then, after those loose ends have wrapped up, or they've asked you about what you do, only then do you give your one-liner. And you're only allowed one line. And this elevator pitch is not about your company. It's literally what you do and why you do it. And it should be 10 to 20 seconds. This is all the talking you're allowed to have. After you give your one-liner, you have to be quiet again. You're not allowed to say anything else. And then if they bite or if they ask questions, you can continue that thread. If they don't care or they give off body language that shows that they're not interested, you don't bring it up again. That's it. That's all you're allowed to give, is the one-liner elevator pitch. Then as you're moving towards the end of the conversation, your goal is to promise future value. So during this time, you should have identified one thing, that one resource you have that you could share with that person that they might find valuable. And so your job is to say, oh, you know what? There's an event I'm going to, you might find it interesting. Do you want me to send you the details? Or, there's someone I think you should meet. Do you want me to make an intro for you? Once you get their buy-in, that's it. You don't do the value on the spot. The value is for the follow-up. So your job is only just to get their buy-in on promising them the future value. And then you exit the conversation. How do you exit the conversation?
Gratitude.
Okay. How do you, after you've given them gratitude, then what? Does anyone here feel uncomfortable just leaving a conversation without a reason if you've just met someone? Do you feel a social obligation to stick around and talk to them until they're ready to leave?
Well, it depends on, if they're still talking.
Okay, what if they are still? Most people, so this whole time period, you actually want to shorten this as much as possible. You want to do this I've done all these steps in 1 minute. Like, you want to aim for like 2-3 minutes, because your job is to plant seeds at the networking event. It's not to build the relationship. So more often than not, you'll be exiting the conversation before them. So does that make you uncomfortable, Neha, if the person's still ready to talk?
It depends. I mean, I normally used to say, oh, I saw someone, which ends up happening, like someone else, or like, oh, I'm gonna go grab a drink, or oh, I gotta go to another event, which, I've never lied about exiting the conversation. It just happens naturally.
Okay.
I think I've seen situations, been part of it before, like where people just look at their phone and then they just walk away. So I'm like, okay, I guess that person had a call or an important text.
Okay, Misha, would that make you uncomfortable if you did that? Like, you're in the middle of a conversation and then you just look at your phone and walk away. Would you feel uncomfortable doing that?
I would, because it'll come across as I wasn't interested in what that person had to say. It would personally make me uncomfortable if someone did that to me, or if I did it. I guess I always give a reason to like exit the conversation.
What reason do you
Isn't that
often
how
give?
you add value? Like, don't you want them to think of you later and, have like a positive connection, versus, oh, that person was so rude, she just looked at her phone and like walked away?
Absolutely. But what reason do you give? Because sometimes you won't have a reason. Sometimes there won't be someone you just saw, or you won't need to go to the bathroom or get a drink. And there isn't some other event to go to. So what reason would you give if you don't have a reason?
Usually I've said, like, it was so lovely to meet you. I'm sure you have other events to get to. I'm going to send you a LinkedIn invite and we can continue to like stay in touch or like learn from each other, or if there's anything I can do to help. That's usually how I've left it. Like, I feel I always have the need to give them something to like walk away with, almost apologetic for leaving the conversation. So I need to work on that.
Well, I've also done the entire, nice meeting you. I guess we got to mix and mingle, that's why we're here. Ha ha ha. And then, like, just mock the awkwardness of networking events and then be like, okay, peace.
That's not bad. That's not bad. So Misha, your point is that you always try to end on like a positive note of you helping them. You've already done that here with promising future value. So you've already told them, I am going to connect you with this, or I'm going to do that. Let's connect on LinkedIn, whatever it is. So that is you've already set the tone. Now to exit, I will give you the same advice I gave for entering the conversation. Give a reason, any reason. Doesn't matter what the reason is. If you use the word because, it unlocks in their brain like the social buy-in. If you use the word because, they will graciously let you leave the conversation. And you can give any reason after that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't even need to make sense. So the same way you enter the conversation is the same way you exit the conversation. And this is key. And the reason this is key is because at this point of the conversation, you actually kind of have them hooked. And the reason is because most people don't do this at networking events. So you have spent most of your time. So profiling your target is about them. Entering the conversation is about them. You're letting them talk. And then disarming opener, you're not making any, you're not saying anything. So this is about them. Your one-liner elevator pitch is about you. Promising future value is about them. So I guarantee, so you're spending this much time on them and you're spending this much time on yourself. One-liner elevator pitch and exiting the conversation. This is about you. So your elevator pitch is about you. Exiting the conversation is about you. Everything else is about them. I guarantee most people at networking events don't get that much attention from the average attendee. And so you have shown that you're a good listener. You've come in with a hypothesis. You've made yourself relevant. You've used the word because. You've disarmed them. And you're promising them future value. Most people don't get that much value from someone in such a short period of time. So they're actually primed and they're ready to like have a full-on conversation with you. And it's easy to fall into the trap of relationship building at that point. So you have to master exiting the conversation. Otherwise, you'll only be able to hit a few people at an event. So that's why it's really important to be able to exit graciously. And just remember, you don't owe them anything. It's an event. Your time is your time. You can protect your time. You don't have to spend it with anyone. So you should not feel bad. Exiting a conversation should not make you feel bad, especially if you've gone through these steps and you've given them this much attention. So tell them, I'm here to meet other people. It was great meeting with you. I will follow up with you on LinkedIn, whatever it is, any reason, but do it graciously and take control of the situation. Okay. So that is how to be intentional about every interaction that you have. Already covered this. All right, number 5. This is the last rule. We're actually almost done. Follow up with everyone. Everyone you meet, you follow up with. Doesn't matter if you think they're useful, if you think you can help them. It doesn't matter. You follow up with every single person that you meet. What are the ways of following up? There's no silver bullet. So a lot of people send an email. I think it's okay. I think it's a little bit clunky and it's kind of static. Once you've sent that email, that's it. It's kind of over and done with. And in this follow-up is where you're going to be adding the value, whatever you promised them previously. And you're going to do this as soon as the event is done, as quickly as possible. I usually do it when I go home. I go home, I make a list of everyone, I send out the follow-ups, and it's over and done with. Most people will wait a day or 2 days or 3 days, and most people will just delay it so long they don't end up actually making doing the follow-ups. What's another way? Take a selfie and text it to them. This is incredibly effective way of remembering. If you meet a lot of people, this gives you a lot of information. It gives you the timestamp of when you met them. You say it was great meeting you at X event, so you know where you met them. And because you have a photo of them, you take a selfie with them, you know exactly what they look like and you remember them. That pegged with their name, with the event, with the timestamp, it's almost impossible to forget them. So that is a good way to follow up. It is a little bit personal. Some people aren't that keen. Add them to your newsletter if they're relevant. If you put out content, and everyone should have a newsletter, whether it's informal. If you're fundraising and you're a founder, you should have a newsletter. At the very least, an investor update newsletter. But you should have something that you send out at a regular cadence to people that are your general supporters, people who are interested in what you're working on. Even if it's just your friends, you should have a newsletter. It's the easiest way to maintain those relationships. Add them on socials. This one is important because you don't just want to add them, you want them to add you. So on like Instagram and Twitter, if you follow them, you need to get them to follow you back. What this does is it allows you to see each other's content. And so in your regular day, when you're regularly like scrolling the feed, you will be reminded of that person whenever they post and you see their stuff, and they will also be reminded of you. So if planting the seed is the most important step, then watering it, low effort watering is the way that you grow those relationships. So newsletter is an very easy way to do it, because you just want to be memorable. You just want to be on their radar. You just want touch points. Socials is a good way. What I do personally, I add them on LinkedIn. I send them a DM with the follow-up, whatever it was. Here's the thing that I was going to give to you. And I ring their bell. Ringing their bell sends me a notification every time they post. And so if I'm on LinkedIn anyways, it's like an extra 2 seconds to see their post. This makes sure you don't miss any of their posts. And then I can comment, or I can like message them, or after some time, if they're really not useful to me, I can unring their bell. And I haven't lost anything. It's no skin off my back. But this is a very like low maintenance way to maintain these relationships. And then you say hi when you see them at events. And you make a point of people you've previously met to at least say hi to them when you see them, because your job is to just get in front of them. The more you get in front of people, the more memorable you are, the more they associate your ask, basically your elevator pitch, with you. And so if you're fundraising in like the travel tech space, for example, and you're on someone's radar, Salim's that guy who's fundraising in the travel tech space. When they meet a travel tech investor, you want them to think of you. And the only way you can be top of mind recall is if you have these multiple touch points. So stay in touch digitally. And when you see them physically, at least say hi so that you're on their radar. So they're reminded of who you are and what you do. And that's it.
Yeah. Just going back to that. Is the best way, sometimes I meet so many people, it gets overwhelming, and I just following up with them is sorry, but that's fine. I'll follow this. What's the best exit and collecting the contact? Is it LinkedIn QR code? People sometimes say, "Oh, let's text each other," and I do take selfies a lot because of the sheer volume of people that I meet. I just don't remember people after they're coming up to me and saying, "Oh yeah," blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay. So I've started taking selfies to remember them, or do the LinkedIn. Is that like the best way to do it? LinkedIn. I mean, even LinkedIn is a black hole. It's like a bottomless pit, because unless there's an easy way to kind of manage LinkedIn and say, oh, okay, these are the last 10 people that I must have met them over here, and etc.
That's a great question. So my answer is whatever system is feasible and sustainable for you is better than some aspirational, like, I'm going to build a new CRM for my networking event type things. And so I've met some founders who are like, yeah, I built a CRM for networking. I'm like, how's that going? And they're like, yeah, it does. I don't use it. So yeah, whatever works and allow, and it will totally depend on the volume of the connections that you're making and the different use cases. So for me, I look to connect with investors as partners and founders as clients. For you, it's probably customers and investors. And so depending on that breakdown, I would pick a system that at least accommodates like 90% of them. So LinkedIn, I agree, is a black hole. It has a lot of issues. What I usually do, I still prefer LinkedIn only because I'm a content creator only on LinkedIn. I don't create content anywhere else. So it's really, really, really easy. If I have a connection with someone, for me to stay memorable in their mind when we're connected on LinkedIn, because they see my posts. So it's literally no additional incremental effort for me to stay memorable and on their radar if I add them on LinkedIn. Now, the way I do it on LinkedIn is I usually get them to scan my QR code. And I make sure they click the 3 dots and hit connect. You'd be amazed how many people hit follow or don't even click anything once they land on there. And the reason I get them to add me on LinkedIn is because I used to add other people on LinkedIn, and a lot of the time they don't even accept the connection request.
Right.
So I get them to add me. And then I can go through at the end of the event I go through each one at a time to make sure I haven't missed anyone.
Right. I make sure at the event that we do a connection. Yeah, so I don't just,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
send them.
If you're going to
I'll
use
close
LinkedIn,
the loop. Yeah, I'll close the loop. Right.
email is okay. I use email for like really formal people who there's like a very clear, I'm going to send you a proposal or something. I would use email in those cases. Text is good for more social kind of vibes. Oh yeah, let's go to an event together. What's your number? And then I'll text you when I go there. It still is a little more static. I think social networks are better because you have them then. Usually you only have, like, you got to make the most of that couple minutes you have with someone. Usually you're not going to get that much attention from them in the future. For most people that you meet, the most time you're going to have with them is during that initial meeting, because most people will fizzle out. So you got to make the most of it. So I think the best way, if you're unclear on how you're going to add value to them and how they're going to add value to you, add each other on a social network that you're the most active on. All right.
Okay.
So today I promised a step-by-step foolproof strategy to network like a boss, stop wasting time talking to useless people, and generate an ROI from the events you attend. What you need to do to accomplish this is follow the steps that we just went through. That's it. That's all there is to it. So show up to events, bring a wingman. If you don't have a wingman, find one at that event. Add value. Your goal at that event is to add value to as many people as possible in the shortest period of time. Make every interaction intentional, using the steps that I went through, and follow up with everyone.
What's the role of the wingman?
The wingman is to make your networking experience more efficient. So if you can so if you both go in with the intention, we're here to meet, to work on our business development plan. So I'm looking to fundraise, I'm looking for customers, whatever it is. You share information with each other in terms of who would be good for the other person to meet and who to avoid. And it's accountability, because if someone else is going and you told them you're going to go, there's a high chance you're going to go.
Okay.
Individually, honestly, I think the highest ROI is using a wingman at an event. It forces you to have structure and accountability with another person. Now, the only caveat is they have to be someone who's there to network too. Don't bring a frat boy.
For sure.
So just that. But in almost all cases, having a wingman is better than not having a wingman. So this is it. This is the system. This is what I used to raise 240K in one event.